The last thing to cover in chapter 2 is going to be the trial balance. So before I actually prepare the trial balance, I want to first go over what the trial balance is. So after preparing the entries, the journal entries into the general journal, which is what we did here. So I zoom in here. We see that in the general journal, we used the double entry system to record all of the transactions in the company's books. We then summarize the transactions. Oh, here we go. We then summarize the transactions using the T accounts. And we pretty much summarize the transactions using the T account for each account. So as you can see here, cash, equipment, office supplies, owner capital, owner withdrawals. These are separate accounts. So they all are isolated from each other. So once we summarize the transactions for each account, we came up with the ending balance based on what occurred from all of these transactions, all 8 transactions. Then after this, well, before I get into that, the T accounts, again, just like in the last video, like I said, it is a representative of the company's ledger. And a ledger includes all of the accounts and the transactions, the debits and credits that occurred in each account. So the next thing we're going to do is prepare a trial balance. And trial balance is pretty much going to group everything together. So it's going to bring in all of the accounts and all of the balances that are associated with each account. And the sum of the debit column must match the sum of the credit column once it's all said and done with bringing all of the accounts in and making sure that the debit and credit columns do match. Like I said before, this doesn't check for accuracy. So whenever your debit and credit columns do match, that doesn't mean that everything is correct. What it does mean is that you're able to, have a certain have the same amount shown in the debit column and also the credit column. But that doesn't mean that the amounts are all associated with the correct accounts. You have to verify that to ensure that all of the amounts that are indeed either debited or credited are associated with the correct accounts. So let me put together this trial balance here so we can go ahead and get this party started. So trial balance. Okay, like I mentioned, the trial balance consists of all of the accounts that were used in a given period and all of the balances that are associated with each account. So trial balance, we are going to start off with just setting it up, account. And then I'm going to put in here, no, what am I doing? I'm going to put in debit and credit, not just amount. So debit and credit. Okay. So one thing to note here when it comes to preparing the trial balance is that the presentation does matter. In other words, which type of accounts that needs to be displayed as far as for order. The order of the accounts that needs to be displayed does matter in the trial balance. So the first type of accounts that needs to be displayed in the trial balance are your asset accounts. Okay, so that's one thing we need to know. That's number one. Number two, the asset accounts that are going to be listed needs to be listed in order of liquidity, which means that the most liquid asset needs to be displayed first. So in this case, it's going to be cash because cash is cash. All right. There's no conversion into cash. Cash is already converted into cash. Okay. If that makes sense. So that's our first account. And then we can see here on the screen that the ending cash balance was a debit of $124,200. So that is going to be inserted into the debit column here in the trial balance. So $124,200. Boom. In the debit column. We're good there for cash. The next account out of the assets that we see here, cash, equipment, office supplies, that needs to be displayed in the trial balance, it's going to be your office supplies. Okay. Office supplies is the second one up that needs to be displayed because that's pretty much going to be the next one up that can be converted into cash quicker than equipment. So I'm going to go ahead and here put $500 because that's the ending balance here that is shown in the office supplies T account, and it is a debit balance. Okay, next one is going to be equipment. Equipment has a debit balance of $30,000. Okay, shown right there. Okay, and we're good with the assets. So what I like to do is over here, just let you know that these are our assets and they need to be displayed first in the trial balance. Okay, so the next one up are our liabilities. Okay, they're the second one up when it comes to displaying it in the trial balance. However, given the 8 transactions that we had, we didn't have any liabilities. But just note, that is the second one, or I want to say the second type of accounts that needs to be displayed in trial balance. The third is going to be equity. And our equity accounts are going to be our owner capital and owner withdrawals. So I'm going to put that there. First, owner capital, it's going to be displayed. And we have a credit balance of $50,000. So I'm going to put that in the credit column, $50,000. Next, we have our owner withdrawals. We have a debit of $1,000. Okay. And that's it for equity. So I'm going to put on here equity. But again, remember, in between assets and equity, liabilities need to be displayed, be in between assets and equity. All right. So the next one here is going to be revenues. And we only have one revenue account, so I'm going to put on here service revenue. And we see there's an ending balance of a credit of $110,000. So that's going to go right here, right below the credit column. Okay, and that's it for revenue. Last, we have our expenses. So we have a few expenses here. I'm going to go ahead and put in here rent expense. Okay, we have an ending debit balance of $2,000. Salaries expense. We have an ending debit balance of $2,000. Lastly, utilities expense. We have a debit balance of $300. Okay. And these are our expenses. Okay. So before I move on, I'm pretty much just going to check to see if our debit column balances out our, well, I'm going to check to see pretty much what the sum of the debit is, and also if the debit column and the credit columns do agree with each other, if they do hold hands. All right, so let's see, $124,200 plus 500 plus 30,000 plus 1,000 plus 2,000, another 2,000 plus 300. So that comes out to be 160,000. Okay, that's the debit column, right? So now we're going to go over to the credit column. Less numbers to worry about. So 50,000 plus 110, that's 160,000. Okay, we are good there. Now again, if you don't balance, that's a problem. So if the credit column doesn't agree with the debit column and vice versa, you have to go back and figure out why. And that can happen. All right, so go ahead and just, be a little bit artistic, show my artistic skills by drawing a box, and it's not even a good box, just to show you that this is a trial balance. So this is a form here that, that needs to be prepared. Now, one thing to note here is that assets, liabilities, if we had them here, and equity, these are your balance sheet accounts. balance sheet accounts. And then your revenues and expenses are your income statement accounts. All right, so it keeps everything in order. So if you need to know where your revenues and expenses are at in the trial balance, just go straight to the bottom. If you want to know where your balance sheet accounts are, assets, liabilities, and equity, it's going to be from the top all the way to the middle.